I entirely agree. I mean, the United States is like a Masonic thing, and like people look past that. It's like, dude, we made all this shit.
So the clip you're about to hear is my conversation with a 32nd degree Freemason. I met this guy on Instagram a few weeks ago. Some other Freemason made a post about Bill Cooper, basically smearing Bill Cooper. So I commented on it. And then this guy, this 32nd degree Freemason, responded to me. And we went back and forth in the comments a little bit. You know, I brought something up to him about Kenneth Mackenzie, the Freemason, who wrote about Baphomet in a book. And then Kenneth Mackenzie says that he can't say anything more about it because it violates the oath of Freemasonry, which is interesting. It's an interesting thing to say. Um, and that's a real quote. That's not made up. That's real. And so the Freemason would respond to me, and he brought up Bill Schneblin, and he said, if Bill Schneblin was legitimate, why wouldn't we, as in Masons, why wouldn't we get some low level Mason to go out and kill him and then pretend like the low level Mason was just some crazy dude? Well, and I said to him, well, if you did that, you would be validating everything he says. So clearly that would be a stupid idea. Like, don't even play dumb. That's stupid as hell. And, he was kind of pretending like he didn't know what I was talking about and stuff. Anyway, eventually, he ends up private messaging me. And he says, he's like, sorry, man, if I came across as rude or arrogant. I'm just not used to people, you know, talking to me like in kind of having an intelligent discussion about it instead of just name calling and stuff. Which is true because a lot of like people will just start screaming like Satanist or you evil piece of shit or you baby eater or something like that, and the conversation doesn't really go anywhere, does it? So I thought, okay, and I didn't tell him about my past experience with Freemasons. I didn't tell him about gang stalking or anything like that. And I just thought, okay, let's have like a discussion about this. So we have a discussion about it. And eventually he started sending voice messages, and then I sent voice messages in response, and then it went from there. And, he was a polite enough guy. Like, I was chatting to him, but I knew he's not going to spill any secrets, right? He's sworn an oath to lie and conceal the truth from all the profane, all the vulgar, right? Me and you, all the non Masons. So what he seemed to do, if once you listen to this, you'll see what I mean. It seemed like he was trying to sort of bamboozle me a little bit with the whole structure of Freemasonry, and because it's very complicated, the structure. And I think he thought that maybe I wouldn't know as much as I do. I don't think he expected me to know as much as I do about the structure and stuff. Like he tried telling me that third degree is the highest degree in Freemasonry, which is half true. It's just the highest degree in the Blue Lodge. Beyond the Blue Lodge, obviously, it's not the highest degree. You know, to join the Royal Arch or the Shrine, you have to be a third degree. So how can third degree be the highest degree in Masonry? And this degrees, people don't even know this. The rite of Memphis Mizraim goes up to 99 degrees that we know about. People always talk about 33rd degree. The Egyptian Masonry, they just call it Egyptian. It's not actually in Egypt. They just call it that. The Egyptian rite, or Memphis Mizraim, goes up to 99 degrees. A lot of people don't know that. But yeah, he tried telling me third degree was the highest degree. Get the fuck out of here. And then he tried telling me that 33rd degree is just like an honorary thing and that it's not like actually a degree. But that's not true at all. And I already knew this because it's true. There's honorary 33rd, but there's also active 33rd. And it seemed that even he didn't know this because when you listen to the interview, he actually says, he actually goes back and corrects himself at one point, and he says, "Oh, I was at the Masonic Library talking to a Freemason, and he was like, yeah, I got it wrong. There is active 33rd." So, you know, for a 32nd degree Freemason, you can tell he doesn't actually know more than you'd expect. And it's interesting. Yeah, again, I didn't bring up gang stalking or my past experiences with Masons because I knew it would, if I just brought that up, it would make the conversation, you know, I wanted to just have a normal conversation and see what this guy said. And it's more interesting what he doesn't say in this conversation. It's not so much what he says, it's more what he doesn't say. Like, I'll bring things up and he won't even be like, "Oh no, that's incorrect." No, he'll pretend like he never even heard me say it. Like, he doesn't even bring it up at all, which I found really interesting. But yeah. What else? Well, here's the thing. Overall, he was a polite dude. You know, he wasn't rude to me or anything. He was a little bit kind of strange when we were first in the comment section, but he wasn't like a rude guy. You know, he's fairly polite. You know, we just chatted. You know, it was cool. You know, I don't know the guy. I'm not making judgments on him. He claims to be an Orthodox Christian. So, you know, which is kind of strange because Orthodox Christianity usually is very anti-Freemasonry. Like, you know, a lot of the like high-ranking people in the Orthodox Church have spoken out against Freemasonry, and you know, people online like Jay Dyer, like these Orthodox Christians, are very anti-Freemasonry as well. So it surprised me that this guy is a 32nd degree and an Orthodox Christian. I found that kind of strange. Yeah. So the conversation might be a little bit boring if you're not really into this stuff. And the structure of Freemasonry, you know, it's a little bit, I wouldn't say like tedious or anything, but it's quite complicated, the structure. But I guarantee you, if you listen to this, you'll learn something. You'll learn some things that you didn't know before. And you get to hear it from the horse's mouth, right? So, yeah. Anyway, I think that's all I gotta say. So, enjoy the conversation, and, I will add this. At the end of the conversation, I said something to him, and he responded to it with an actual text message instead of a voice message. And it was something to do with the crown, as in like the city of London or the crown of England, right? And there was like a paragraph, and I saw it on my like notifications. And then when I went to click it, he had unsent the message. And since then, that was over a week ago, I haven't heard a single thing back from this guy. So I think either I was getting a little too close to the sun for him and he got uncomfortable, or he didn't want to really like continue, or somebody told him like, "Hey, like, quit talking to that dude," you know. Don't know. I don't know which one it was, but it was weird. He responded with a typed out message, and then he unsent the message. So I don't actually remember like what he said. But yeah, I haven't heard a thing back from him, and it's been over a week. Anyway, enjoy the conversation.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm doing a voice message because I'm just sitting in my car on my lunch break, dude. It's like 104 degrees Fahrenheit here, dude. It's fucking hot. But anyway, so, yeah, no, I completely get what you're saying. I disagree with the Vatican myself. I don't find it to be a legitimate kind of thing. Well, I shouldn't say legitimate, but like, I just don't like. I don't like the idea that Peter is just supersedes everybody in the church and is the vicar of Christ and stands in place of Christ. I don't like that. I think that's completely bullshit. But like, do I believe Rome has supremacy? Yeah. Superiority? No. But primacy. You know, they were the first. What do you call it? I can't think of the words. It's hot as fuck. Sorry. But yeah, no. With Masonry, I would more than happily just have a discussion about it because, like I said, like some dude just commented and said, "You're not even a 33rd." Like, dog, yeah, you're right. You can't be a 33rd unless you're like 35. For one, like I got a few years, dog.
Yeah, man, I'll just respond on voice message as well. So, this is a New Zealand accent, by the way. Hopefully, it's clear enough for you to understand. So, oh yeah, I have many things about the Vatican that I'm just confused about, or not confused about, but suspicious of. And things that are in the narrative of the creation of the Vatican that, to me, don't seem to make sense. You know, the Roman Empire was persecuting Christians, you know, in the few centuries after Christ's death and whatnot. But what I don't understand is that Peter and all the boys, right, they were all in the Levant. And, I mean, it was Roman territory at the time, but why did Peter decide to go right into Rome itself, the heart of the Roman Empire, to establish the religion that Rome itself despised? That, to me, makes no sense. That would be like... shit. That would be like ISIS going to the White House and establishing their base there. I mean, maybe it was like a symbolic fuck you to Rome, right? But see, what I think... well, maybe we can get into that some other time. Anyway, in regards to Masonry, I had no idea that you had to be 35 in order to become a 33rd. I've never heard that before, but it's interesting. I didn't know there was any age requirement for any sort of degree work or anything, well, apart from being 18 or 21, depending on the jurisdiction or whatever. But there is one question that actually came to mind. I asked this to Christian Masons in general about the scripture where Jesus says not to swear any oaths, right? And I know that, you know, obviously when you're going through the, you know, initiation, you have the book of choice, you know, so if you're a Christian, the Bible. But within that Bible, it says not to swear any oaths. That's the words of Jesus himself. So to me, it's a little bit contradictory that they would have you swear the oath, and not only swear the oath, but to swear the oath on the book that contains the scripture of Christ telling you not to do so. And I know, I mean, in the public sort of, you know, when you go to court, or when you know, sworn in as, let's say, the President of the United States, you do the same. And that, to me, has always stuck out to me as a glaring contradiction that seems to fly over people's heads. Because Christ himself said, do not swear any oaths. Something along those lines. I don't know the exact passage. But yeah, if you could answer that would be, or explain it, or whatever, that would be appreciated. Also, just one more thing, on the topic of Masonry in general, like, if there's something that violates the, you know, the oath or whatever, there's no pressure to answer it or not answer it. Like I get it, you know, I can respect that. Just, yeah, if we can discuss it, and if you can answer what you can, or if you can't answer what you can't, that's all good, you know, no problem.
It's funny you say, like, you have an accent, because, I mean, to you, I have an accent. I don't know, I just found that kind of funny. But, anywho, with the oath thing, I've always kind of seen that as, like, taking a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a false oath, right? Like, I swear by God. Because even Matthew, no, I think it was Peter in the book of Matthew, I want to say. Maybe it was Acts. Anyway, he calls, like, you know, and says, God is my witness, you know, and that's in the same sense an oath, but, like, yeah, with the whole public office thing and everything like that, I think that's what the scripture's talking about, just because, you know, like with the founding fathers, well, they were Protestants and everything. Most were like Protestants, so it's hard to say if they just accepted the scripture or not. But anywho, yeah, I've always seen it as false oaths, if that makes sense. But yeah, so with the 33rd degree, it's more so like it has its own like play and everything, because that's pretty much what all the rituals and degrees are. Is just it's a play portraying a virtue through a historical kind of lens. Like, I mean, the first three, this isn't secrets. Like, we have very, very few secrets in reality compared to what we tell. So like with our first three degrees, it covers this character Hiram Abiff, who was one of the builders of King Solomon's temple. He was the master builder or master mason, and the worshipful, like how you have in a lodge. You know, I guess Freemasonry, the best way I can word it is it borrows a lot from the Old Testament while bringing in some from the New Testament. It's a very, I don't want to like, you know, half-ass it and say it's not in depth, but like it's not super deep. But like the Hiram thing, like we know that's not historically like accurate or confirmed or anything like that. It's kind of just like a tradition that we made up. And like I said, we kind of just use it as like a sort of like, I can't think of the way to word it. But yeah, with the 33rd is a weird one. I kind of went on a tangent there. I apologize about that. But the 33rd is you have to be 35. Some jurisdictions say you have to be a Scottish Rite Mason for 4 years. Some say you might have to do it for 7 years. That's usually, it depends, because we have two jurisdictions in the United States. We have the northern and southern. Some of our degrees are different, because like that's the thing too, is the degrees aren't necessarily linear. You know, like it's not like well, your first three, you have to get your first three before you get into anything else. Once you have your third, you can travel to other lodges, stuff like that. Then you have like York Rite and Scottish Rite. Those are your big two sides. But there's other stuff like, you know, the Shrine, the Grotto, the Knight Masons, the Allied Masonic degrees, like that kind of thing. And each of those has their own little stuff I can touch on too. But I don't know, what was I getting at? Yeah, with the 33rd. So it's more so a service award than anything. So you have to be 35, and you have to have been a Mason for 4 to 7 years, or Scottish Rite Mason for 4 to 7 years. It's technically not different, but you get what I'm saying. And it's basically just like a service award of like, hey, you've done an exemplary service to your country, your community, or whatever. You know, pretty much just being an exemplary person in society and being like a cornerstone of your society. But another thing I'll touch on, just to like give you some more context, I'm sure you know a good chunk of what I'm about to say, but like with the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, you know, you have York Rite's your more Christian side. It's more based around like Christian history, and it's a weird one. A lot of Christian brothers kind of have some trouble with it sometimes, unless you're getting into the Knights Templar. Knights Templar, you have to be a Christian. You can't get in otherwise. But you can get into like the Knights of Malta, stuff like that, like the smaller orders in the consistory, which is a portion of the York Rite. So you have Royal Arch. You get your Royal Arch first before you go to Council or Commandery. Sorry, I said consistory, I meant Commandery. Now, on your Scottish Rite side, in order to be a Scottish Rite Mason, you got to get your fourth. But because you have a fourth, it doesn't mean you're higher up than a third. By technicality, the most you can really ever be is a Master Mason, so your third degree. You can't really go any higher than that. You don't get any privilege for being anything else, if you get what I'm saying. Like, in order to get in some bodies and be the head of that body, you know, you got to get some merit on you. But with the Blue Lodge, no, it's pretty much the only real merit-based system that actually, like, well, not merit-based system, but like the only system in which your degree does matter, to a sense. Like I said, with Scottish Rite, you get your fourth. You can get any of those degrees after that. One of the highest degree you've seen is your degree. So like me, I've seen the 4th, 8th, 14th, 29th, and 32nd. So I would identify it as a 32nd degree Mason, even though I haven't seen all, 28 or 29 degrees before that. I already touched on the 33rd, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one reason why a lot of people conflate Freemasonry in general with being like a Jewish creation, because a lot of the plays, as you say, are based around, Old Testament, stories from Judaism. But that doesn't necessarily mean it was created by the Jews. It just means that the stories and the lessons or whatever that are taught in those plays just come from a Jewish origin. It doesn't mean that there's some conspiracy that the Jews are all behind it and it's all like a Jewish tool or what the Nazis and stuff say. But the when it comes to third degree being the highest, and not getting any privileges. I mean, you have to be a Master Mason to, for example, like go through the Royal Arch. So a privilege would be, you can't belong to the Royal Arch unless you're a Master. And then there's like above that, like Red Cross of Constantine and stuff like that. I believe, you go through this to go through that. It's like the way the Shriners work. Like, you used to have to be a 32, I believe, in the Scottish, and then you would be able to join the Shrine. But now it's just Master Mason, I believe, third degree. But and then above the Shrine you have the Royal Order of Jesters, which are kind of strange. They got into some trouble back in 2007, 2006. I don't know. You might know about that. You probably do. But then, even above that, you have to be a jester to be part of the Secret Order of Brothers in Blood, Sobib, It's just like concentric circles within concentric circles within concentric circles. And, to me, it seems like, well, third degree. Like, that's all fine and dandy, you can travel between lodges and so forth. I mean, Joe Biden himself was, I believe, last year or this year, maybe late last year, he was awarded honorary Master Mason by Prince Hall, which technically, I guess that means he can visit Blue Lodges, I believe. If that's not the case, you would know. I don't know. I don't know the technicality of all of that, but and Reagan, I believe, was awarded the honorary 33rd as well. But there's a difference. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's the honorary 33rd, and then there's active 33rd. So as far as I know, like Manly P. Hall, for example, was awarded the honorary 33rd. As for the active 33rd, I'm not quite sure what that actually is. But here in New Zealand, we have what's known as, they don't call it what you call it over there. Here they call it the ANA, the Ancient and Accepted Rite. That's the 33rd. So, and they meet, they have their processions or their meetings or whatever you want to call it, But, third degree is the highest you can go in the Blue Lodge. But there are definitely other recognized bodies that are recognized that you can advance to. And as for the scripture of Jesus talking about oaths, I just went and double checked, and he said, "Do not take an oath at all." That was his word. Well, I read KJV and NIV, and it said no oaths at all, like just flat out none. Which, if you're looking at it from a strict interpretation, that's like, I cannot take an oath at all. I should never swear by God or by earth or, whatever. There's some denominations or churches would teach, it's a little more loose than that, but I guess it depends what you interpret it as. But from a strict biblical sense, he says, do not take any oaths at all, like whatsoever.
So, and then this gets even smaller onto the whole political scale of Masonry. So each state has their own jurisdiction. In the United States, we don't have a unified Grand Lodge like how England does. So basically what we have is we have like tiny differences between each state. So the AF and AM lodges, so ancient, free, and accepted Masons, they usually use oath as the terminology, whereas we, like F and AM states, free and accepted Masons, we use the word obligation, because it's more so seen as calling upon God to witness, like as God is my witness kind of deal, is almost the exact terminology. Without getting too much into the degree work, the terminology is basically what is it? I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry. Like I said, my degree work's not the greatest at the moment. But no, with the other topic we were talking about, I completely get where you're coming from. Like how each has their own little hierarchy in that, But the thing is, like, for example, the Royal Order of Jesters, if one of them were to go to a Blue Lodge and try to, like, flaunt all that don't mean shit to a Master Mason. You know what I mean? So, like, the technical top of the Masonic hierarchy is the third degree to a sense. But once you move on to all the other stuff, it's, the hierarchy of that body and of that body. So, like, the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of, for example, right? He has head over everybody. So even if someone is head of the entire Scottish Rite, if they're in his state, they're under him, no matter what body they get into. But yeah, I know what you were talking about with the Royal Order of the Jesters. They were pretty much bringing prostitutes to a bunch of shit, and prostitution's illegal here, so they got some shit for that. They didn't get too much time. I know I had heard about the whole child thing, so I looked into it, and I couldn't really find anything. All I could really find was just they were sending in prostitutes from like Canada to New York or some shit like that, which it's the Shriners. They're a bunch of party holics. They're notorious for that. Even more so than the Scottish Rite. But yeah, with Joe Biden, right, he got inducted to a Prince Hall Lodge. Now, Prince Hall is weird because they don't share the same Grand Lodge as us. So, different Grand Lodges have to recognize each other and everything, and then you get to the political shit, which we had one in the U.S., probably a few years ago. Tennessee tried to make it to where gay men could not be, inducted into lodges, and I think 3 Grand Lodges stopped recognizing them. So it became a whole shitty ordeal, but they got that resolved and they took back on that one. Yeah, but with like Joe Biden getting, the Prince Hall and everything like that, that's more so like the African American Masons, because there's a Mason named Prince Hall way back when, early America, and he tried to petition to a lodge in Boston and they wouldn't accept him. So he started his own lodge, got the degree look, everything like that, and for the longest time, we didn't recognize each other. Nowadays, we recognize each other a fuck ton. Like, I have a picture I could show you of me and my lodge. We have all the Prince Hall brothers there because we were doing a degree together. So, like, we're going to see the way they do their degrees. They're going to see the way we do our degrees. And, yeah, but with, like, honorary Master Mason degrees, they can't necessarily do anything that a Mason can do, like an earned Mason, because they haven't seen anything degree work, anything like that. It's more so just like an honorific kind of deal. But like, yeah, with the honorific 33rd, it's the same thing. They can't go to any like Scottish Rite events or anything like that, or at least not in my jurisdiction. I can't speak for New Zealand jurisdiction. For our jurisdiction, we can't do that. So like, when it comes to Scottish Rite, it's kind of it's earned. It definitely is earned. A lot of people say it isn't, but it definitely is. It's an earned degree, but the thing with it is, you have to be making an impact. And it has to be noticed, and you have to be voted on, and they only vote every 2 years. So they bring a certain amount of candidates, to get their 33rd. They review each candidate, if they don't think they deserve it yet, they don't get it. If they think so-and-so deserves it, they get it. Really, that's like the, real 33rd thing. Like, they got a little clip of 33rds, but, again, merit-based for that appendant body. But like with the honorific 33rds, they can't really do anything. It's pretty much just a title, like how the Master Mason one is. But yeah, so like for me, I'm D. Malay. I'm a Master Mason, obviously. I'm a 32nd degree Mason, and I'm in the Knights of St. Andrew. So like I'm in a few appendant bodies, but I plan on joining York Rite eventually. like I said, it's one of them things. You just gotta find the time. That's the big thing. But aside from that, I was gonna mention the what do you call it? Oh yeah, there's a conspiracy theory I want to mention. So like how they say it's a Jewish creation, like how you brought up earlier, that wouldn't make sense. They allowed in Henry IV and gave him a 33rd. And then I'm trying to think of the name of the Jewish dude. Harry Houdini. Pretty sure he got a 33rd as well. So it's like, so the Jewish dude gets it, and the borderline Nazi gets it too. That doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? But even like our degrees, like people think like we're this ancient, crazy, like going underground shit. It's like, dude, I can log into my Scottish Rite app, and I can watch some of the degrees, and I can earn the degrees. Like right now, we're showing all the American history ones, so all I gotta do is just log in and watch it, and then I get that degree. See, and that's like what I mean is like, it's weird how it actually is compared to how it's portrayed and everything like that.
I mean, yeah, I've heard that back in the day, lodges wouldn't let Jews in, but I mean, the United Grand Lodge of England let the Rothschilds in the 1700s. I believe 2 members of the Rothschild family, and they're Jewish. They were allowed in. But yeah, like what you were talking about earlier, about like Prince Hall and that, and like Tennessee. I have heard that. I have heard that there are some. Well, yeah, like each state has its own Grand Lodge, I believe, right? So there's like the Grand Lodge of Tennessee, and like the Grand Lodge of New York, and the Grand Lodge of this and that and this and that. Which yeah, it's a little different. So I did hear there was one. I don't think it was a Grand Lodge, but there was one lodge that was trying to. There was a black dude trying to get membership, and the members of that lodge like blackballed him. They were like, "Nah, you're not joining this lodge. You're not joining this lodge, boy." But I think eventually he made it in. I don't know if you might have seen the story about it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, is it true that the regular, like the white lodges and the Prince Hall lodges were segregated until 1993? That's what I heard. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true though. And I can't remember where I heard that. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, when you read some of Pike's stuff, and I mean, it was kind of normal in society back then, the whole segregation situation, the lodges didn't mix. But he said something about when a Negro's allowed to join his lodge, he'll leave Freemasonry or something like that. Because he also had some role in the Ku Klux Klan, that's for sure. They try to say he didn't, but he definitely did. But again, it's that back then it was normal. There were many people who were part of the KKK back then. These days it seems like ludicrous, but back then it was just part of normal society. I mean, they were kind of frowned upon, in a way, especially, I guess, by the Northerners, or But anyway, and yeah, what you're talking about the 33rd, like the honorific 33rd. It's just I just see it the same way as like an honorary, master's degree at a university. You know what I mean? And I kind of see it like, you can kind of say the Blue Lodge is, I mean, this might be a weird analogy, but like the Blue Lodge would be like the high school. And then once you graduate the high school, once you're like a master, you can go through there's like all the different branches of like colleges, right? And there's lots of different paths you can take and everything like that. And it kind of goes up in this sort of system. And it's very complex, And what I don't understand is, why does it need to be so intricate? Why is it so intricate? You know what I mean? It seems like there is something, and like we were talking about the jesters and stuff, and then above that, Secret Order of Brothers in Blood, which is even less known about. And you got to be a jester to be even, And I believe if you even request membership into the jesters while you're in the shrine, you're almost certainly not going to be admitted. Like you'll be blackballed for life. and but Secret Order of Brothers in Blood, which is available for jesters only, that's even less talked about because jesters are very secretive, especially after what happened, and Sobib is just completely, basically just invisible. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is there are these invisible sort of side orders and these bodies that exist, but they're very, very sort of exclusive and very not known about even by some Masons, Sorry, it cut out there, but yeah, what I was saying about about Sobib, Secret Order of Brothers in Blood, just based on what I see and how private and how under the radar that appendant body is. Just like the jesters, but even the jesters are more visible than them. This implies that there are like orders out there and appendant bodies that are just completely unknown, until you're kind of given the tap and allowed in, and it's like how would we know that's not true, because until you're brought into that, there's no way of knowing. But based on what we can see with things like Secret Order of Brothers in Blood, based on what we can see with that, is that there are very, very exclusive and very like secretive orders. And then they go out laterally. They're not always like vertical. They'll go out like laterally, and it's just you know how it is when you look at those charts and stuff. But yeah, there's I mean, it's very intricate, and it's some say it's a charity, some say it's just an organization, like a social club. Some say it's like a mix of all these things, and it's just, but to me, it's way too intricate to be nothing. And when you look at the, how do you say it, the kind of secular and kind of like, the shift from the old world to the new world with, the French and American revolutions, like it's a documented fact that Freemasonry played a part in that. I mean, you look at the French Revolution for sure. And I know it's different, the continental versus, like UGLE or American. Continental, like European Masonry is very different. But nonetheless, Freemasonry played a part in the French Revolution and the American Revolution. In South America and many different countries. Many different countries. Almost any country you can think of, really. I mean, like even Turkey, the transition from the Ottoman Empire to the sort of secular, Turkish Republic. It almost seems like any country with a constitution or with a sort of like just like a secular like republic or constitution was built by Freemasonry or at least Masonic ideals, if that makes sense. I think that's the more accurate way to put it. So in my mind, I do believe that there is a big connection, and it's obviously, if that's true, some say it is, some say it's not. But if it is true, it definitely wouldn't be something that they would advertise, and it wouldn't be something that they would kind of, publicly brandish, You would have to keep that secret. You wouldn't be able to just go around talking about it and all that. But yeah, when it comes to like Pike's work, for example, like people quote Morals and Dogma all the time. And there is one part in Morals and Dogma where he talks about Jacques de Molay, and before he was burnt in the flames, he created like the lodge in the north, the lodge in the east, the lodge in the west, the lodge in the south, Edinburgh and Naples and Paris, I believe, and one other, I can't remember. But and said it was, like
the Revenge Against the Thrones and the tiara, the Vatican, for setting him on fire. And I mean, come on, I mean, I kind of get it. I actually have a I have a pretty decently big Protestant figure in my family tree, Tyndale. I don't know if you know who that is. Translated it to English, the Bible to English, and yeah, the Catholic Church did not like that, and they burnt him at the stake. But that's one thing I've never understood about the Catholic Church is they kept the Bible basically in Latin so that the vulgar couldn't read it. They couldn't read it. They'd need to interpret it through a priest, keeping them in the dark, basically. And when he translated it to English so that all the average people could read it, they fucking burned him alive, Which to me shows me that that cannot be a Christian institution, because if they were Christian, surely they would want to spread the word of God to as many people as possible, right? But no, it seems that they want to keep their interpretation only and that dogma instead of actually letting people find out for themselves what's in the Bible, and they just kept it Latin. And that to me is always never sit right with me. It's never sat right with me, like how can you claim to be Christian as like a Catholic leader from, the Middle Ages, or 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, but at the same time you burn a guy at the stake for translating the Bible into a readable language for the average person to read. It's almost as if the Vatican is the Roman Empire and they just transformed, the saying, you can't beat it, you join it. And no matter how many Christians they persecuted and crucified and beheaded, they couldn't stop Christianity. And then, with Emperor Constantine, he saw the cross in the sky or whatever it was. I mean, I highly doubt that. And then he converted the religion to Christianity, the state religion. But yeah. Anyway, this is a deep topic, and yeah, I don't know if that thing about Kenneth Mackenzie and Baphomet. I mean, he said, on the topic of Baphomet, he said that some say that Baphomet is the creator, but that he cannot say anymore because it's violating what he's bound to heal, conceal, and never reveal, and that to me sort of is questionable. That being said, I don't really understand what Baphomet is, because it's almost like Baal. People say Baal is an entity, but Baal just means Lord. You know what I mean? It's kind of like how people will say like Allah is a separate entity from God, but Allah just means God in Arabic, and Christian Arabic speaking Christians call God Allah, So when people talk about Baal being a separate entity and Baphomet and all this stuff, I get lost with all that stuff, because it's just like, I don't actually know what it is, or I don't know what it represents. And but people online are very sure they know what it represents, and they'll go, look, it's the goat with the, the tits and the hooves and everything. And it's like, yeah, that's Eliphas Levi's depiction of Baphomet. But what actually is Baphomet? But I don't know if you've ever seen The Exorcist, like the original Exorcist movie. Some very interesting stuff. If you watch the intro scene when they're in Iraq, and the priest, he sees the statue of Pazuzu, and I believe it was actually blown up by ISIS in like the 2010s. But anyway, that statue, if you just look at it, like one arm up, one arm down, the face of an animal, the head of an animal, but the body of a human, the serpentine phallus or whatever, it's like symbolically very similar to what Eliphas Levi depicted in that Baphomet image.
So the rumor with Baphomet kind of goes like that the Knights Templar were becoming like Gnostic and worshipped this statue, this like grim statue, which no one's ever been able to find or prove this. It was just what the Catholic Church said after they got the Knights Templar to do all of their fucking dirty work, because obviously it's the Catholic Church. They pretty much just have you be their bitch and then say, oh, well, you're a sinner. It's like, well, we trusted you as the vicar of Christ, and that's why I have such a big issue with identifying the Catholic Patriarch as a vicar of Christ or a standing in place of Christ. Is no man can do that. I mean, like, if we believe in the Nicene Creed and say that Jesus is God and one with the Father and the Holy Spirit, we cannot say that someone can stand in his place. It dilutes the position of Christ down so much, and I have an issue with that. But like we were saying with the Royal Order of the Jesters, I know a few jesters myself personally. They seem upstanding folk. Usually with the jesters, they're involved in like a bunch of different Masonic orders, because like you were saying, there are like secretive orders. Like we have orders that are exclusive to Masonic authors. I forget what the actual body is called, but we have like an entire body dedicated to that. We have the Knight Masons. I don't know too much about them. I'd have to look more into them. You have the Allied Masonic degrees, and these aren't like in York Rite or Scottish Rite. These are separate bodies entirely. But York and Scottish Rite are obviously the biggest. So you have the Allied Masonic degrees, which is basically they just look at degrees that were practiced throughout history, and they're like, yeah, let's, preserve these. Let's research these. Let's try to find like old degrees that aren't done anymore. And it's more so like a research lodge, because we have lodges that are dedicated to researching like Masonic history, old degrees, things like that. I don't want to say we're very investigative when it comes to like history, but like we kind of do tend to be. I mean, me personally, I tend to get a little bit deeper into it. So like, here's a good example. One of the U.S. presidents, William McKinley, he was the chaplain of the Union. So, like Civil War kind of stuff, and this kind of touches back on the whole Prince Hall thing, or the Black Mason thing. So yeah, Albert Pike was a Confederate through and through. That's obvious. I'm pretty sure he was a general, or maybe a captain, high ranking. But he, what was I gonna say? Shit, I'm drawing a blank. But yeah, so like President William McKinley was the chaplain of the Union, and he was raised in a lodge of all ex-Confederates, like a few months after the war. Because like the way we've always looked at it is like, no matter what wars we go into or anything like that, we're gonna be brothers. It's why they didn't kill Benedict Arnold. They could have killed Benedict Arnold 100%. They could have killed him 5 times over, but he was a brother, so he kind of got a little bit of privilege technically. And without getting too deep into it, he did violate his Masonic oath. As for the Masonic oath that he was talking about Baphomet, I don't know. I'd have to look into that. Like I said, I can't really speak on what Mackenzie believes, because like I said, it's all pretty much up to your interpretation, right? So like the G, for example, that could mean the grand architect of the universe. That could mean God. That could mean geometry. It all depends. Because Masonic symbolism isn't like a fully definitive thing of like you're supposed to take it this way. You take it however you do to better yourself. That's just kind of the way we've always seen it. But yeah, with like those small little like smaller bodies, there's quite a few of those kinds of bodies. It all really just depends on what you're into, everything like that. Because like we have other stuff like grotto. Obviously we have the shrine. I'm trying to think of what other Masonic bodies there are. Like I said, the Knights of St. Andrew. Then you have all the AMD degrees. And then another thing I'd like to touch on too, just to like put this out there, like you were saying how like complex it is. Even the northern and southern Masonic jurisdiction, we do different degrees, because the degrees aren't necessarily like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not how it is with like any other kind of like sort of thing, I guess is the best way I can put it, because like we can change around degrees. Like we can change the script, we can change whatever the roles may be, that sort of thing. But like even in American politics, we've had like an insane amount of Freemasons. I'm pretty sure like a third of our presidents have been Freemasons, like 18 presidents. One of the more recent was Harry Truman, and I think he's a good example of like, okay, put it this way. So in Lodge, we have a position called Tyler. The Tyler tiles the Lodge and makes sure that nobody who's not a Mason gets in. So when Harry Truman, he would be traveling, for being the president, obviously, and he would go to a lodge, they would, his Secret Service members would not be allowed in, and Tyler would not allow them in. They would like try to use the fact their Secret Service is like a thing over them, and they're like, well, that kind of sucks, because he's a Mason, he's allowed in, you're not, so you're not getting in. So the Secret Service had to end up finding people who were Masons, making them Secret Service, and then having them go with President Truman. And I met a brother who knew President Truman, and he walked up to him in a lodge one day and said, President Truman's an honor to meet you, all this, went on like a little tangent. And he stopped me, he said, well, what am I? He said, well, you're a Master Mason. He said, what are you? He said, I'm a Master Mason. He said, my name is Brother Truman. Don't call me president here. I don't come here to be the president. I come here to be your brother. And like I've always recognized that sort of humbleness among most Masons. You have the Masons who are cocky and rude, and like that's one of the other things is like how a Mason acts at home. We can't really define that. Now, if a Mason's in jail for more than a year, they're they're kicked out. We don't usually, if you're in jail for more than a year, you didn't do something good, so we don't allow people like that to stay in. As for the Christian side, I don't know about Tyndale myself. My great-great-grandfather was a Mason over in Scotland. He moved here, I think, in 1917. And I still have his lodge card, or his dues card for the lodge over in Scotland. And like I always found that kind of stuff interesting. That was one of the reasons I became a Mason was I looked into my great-great-grandfather, and he was a really good dude. And I always just thought it was cool. My great-grandfather, on the other hand, wasn't a Mason. He was like an eagle, an elk, a moose, which is like other fraternal groups here that aren't the same as Masonry by at all. They're like drinking clubs. And he was in quite a few of those. Maybe not the greatest person in the world, but a decent enough man. But yeah, my great-great-grandfather, he was good. And then my Irish side of my family, pretty much descended of King Niall, the 9 hostages, and everything like that. First major clan in Ireland to convert to Christianity from St. Patrick. So like that's the coolest thing I think I got in my lineage. And my 23andMe updated today, whoop-de-doo. I gave my fucking DNA to Israel, say what you will. But anyway, while I was looking at that, I got a notification this morning from it that I guess I'm related to one of the early colonists in Maryland. And I didn't even know I had any family that was here before like the 1790s. So that kind of blew my fucking mind. But yeah, so I mean, there's so many directions to go with Freemasonry because there's so many independent bodies that have just started existing over time. It's hard to cover everything. I don't think everyone knows everything. And like with the whole, crazy shit that goes on, like how some people say like, oh, I was in a lodge and this happened. Like, there are clandestine lodges. Like, that's what the Grand Lodges are for, to keep us in check. So like, there are Grand Lodges out there that don't, that don't keep people in check. In like Turkey, right? Like how you talk about Turkey. Turkey's Grand Lodge we don't recognize because they basically act like a mafia. We don't fuck with that. So basically, if you're not chartered by the United Grand Lodge of England, the Grand Lodge of Ireland, or the Grand Lodge of Scotland, you have no lineage and you're considered clandestine. If you were recognized at a point and you changed something in the landmark, so like let's say you allowed in women, now you're in a regular lodge. And Masons cannot talk about Freemasonry with irregular brothers or clandestine brothers. We're not allowed to do that. And depending on who you ask, the terms like irregular and clandestine can be used different, because I know a lot of the English usually say like, oh, well, if they practice Freemasonry, but they're just not recognized and they don't have any lineage, they're considered irregular. But like we say clandestine, We consider a lodge that does something irregular to be irregular. We consider a lodge that is seemingly clandestine to be clandestine. It's not, it's kind of black and white. We don't try to overcomplicate that part. But like I say, like we still have like lodge politics and shit like that too. Like here in we had an issue with the Widow Sons, which are a group of bikers. It's like a biker club in Masonry, and they were pretty much kicked out of Michigan over some lodge politics because they were wearing like road leathers to lodge and stuff like that. So we said, hey, we're gonna pull your recognition because you guys are acting fucking fools. There was a lot that went into that, but some stuff I can't touch on. The only real thing I can say is like nothing illegal was happening. It was literally just lodge and Masonic politics. That's really all it was. And but like with like all the fucked up shit that's happened, that can completely happen in clandestine lodges. Like the Memphis Mizraim, right? How they talk about that. If a Mason in any recognized Grand Lodge under the Grand Lodge of England were to join that, they get kicked out. They're done. Unless they found a way to work it within the confines of the United Grand Lodge of England, you're not gonna be able to. We don't accept that because of the teachings of it, and it's kind of fucked up. And then like Palladium Masonry, like how Bill Schnoebelen talked about, the vampire demigod Wiccan witch, whatever the fuck all he was. That motherfucker has so many goddamn stories. Those are the stories I don't believe. Is like they're everything. They're high-ranking in everything. They were a high-ranking Mormon bishop. They were a high-ranking fucking Catholic bishop. They were a fucking vampire. They were a high-ranking witch. They were a high-ranking Wiccan. They were a high-ranking Druid. I just don't believe that. And I could go more into that. But like I said, if there's anything like in particular, like structure-wise or anything like that you want to talk about, I'm more than fine talking about it. Because like I said, as long as I'm not spewing like the ritual work at you or the degree work, I'm good. I mean, you can find the degree work online if you're really interested. It's fairly easy to find. People just tend to overcomplicate it, and like, whenever I tell the truth about Masonry, they're like, I don't believe you. It's like, okay, I don't really care if you believe me. I'm in this shit. I would probably know. I mean, like the 33rd degree, I can't say I know for sure. But of all the people that I've met that have received the 33rd, not a single one of them I would question as a Satanist. Not a single one I would question as like anything occult. They're mostly, God-fearing Christian people. Because we have like guys who are like deacons and stuff like that in the Masonry, and they're still very devout to their church. We had a lot of brothers, because we had a brother just recently get in who was a pagan, and most of the lodge was against it. Like most of my lodge, because we're a fairly conservative lodge, we usually only like Christians and occasionally Muslims, but that was, again, lodge politics. That had to do with another lodge merging into ours. That's another thing too. But anyway, basically we were very hesitant because he was a pagan. A lot of the conservative Christian brothers there don't know necessarily like what to do about that. And also, there's a lot of agnostic brothers. You'll find that too. You'll find a lot of brothers, especially in today's, society, that are like, I believe there's a God, I just don't know which one. And like, we're cool with that. Most of the agnostic brothers I know are pretty open about it. They're not like, oh, I'm a Christian, and then just, going about their day, or going about and doing other stuff, away from the lodge. They're usually very honest about it. They're like, yeah, I'm agnostic, I don't know what there is, but, and that's really aside from the point, I should say. But yeah, no, with the pagan brother, we kind of like had to ask him, like, well, tell us about, your religion. So we sat there, broke it down, and there's like actual practice to it. There's actual, like, it has the genuine characteristics of a religion. So we were like, okay, we can understand that. We get it. So we allowed it in. Like I say, it's very dependent on which lodge you're at, because you could get blackballed because someone doesn't like your tattoos. You can get blackballed because you have a beard, and they don't have to specify the reason. But like I said, it's at the lodge's discretion. Funny enough, now that we're talking about it, and I can talk about this because it's not a secret. The 24th degree, Brothers of Tolerance, I'm gonna be on the what do you call it for that? I'm gonna be one of the actors for that degree. But Like I said, most of the degrees you can look up, you could probably find a script to all of them too. I mean, I have scripts to most of them, but if you were ever really like that interested, you could probably find the script. I don't know how New Zealand is, because like I said, each Grand Lodge has their own little different, like degree work or degrees even. Some have degrees, others don't. Like, here we have the Knights of St. Andrew. Other states might not have the Knights of St. Andrew. We only have, I think, like 2 chapters in the entire state. Whereas, like, Royal Arch, fucking everywhere. Council, fucking everywhere. Commandery, fucking everywhere. But with KSA, well, there's not really, like, very many chapters that do it. It's a pretty small order. Very Scottish. Very Scottish. Well, then again, St. Andrew is the patron saint of Scotland, if I'm correct. I don't remember. I think so. But yeah, I just got up. I'm probably going to watch one of the degrees, get ready, and head to work. I got a fucking 3-hour drive to get to this job site I got to go to. So, not looking forward to that, but that's my job. Oh, and last thing before I do go, I honestly, genuinely appreciate this conversation, because usually when I'm talking to someone that's skeptical of masonry, they're usually coming at me with conspiracy theories and then just talking shit. And I appreciate that you're willing to sit here and actually have a conversation and ask questions and talk about the history of it. Like, I enjoy an intelligent conversation. I can't fucking stand when they're just like, gay, Jewish, Satanist. Like, well, which one am I? Satanist or Jewish? They're the same thing. Oh, okay. Like, you know what I mean? So I just appreciate the honest conversation.
Yeah, so if you want the reference for the Baphomet mention, it's in the book is called The Royal Masonic Cyclopedia by Kenneth Mackenzie, and it's checked page 67 to 68. Yeah, like when you talk about interpretation of symbolism and stuff, like in the G, meaning geometry or God or whatever. I also heard back in the day, I heard one interpretation or one sort of explanation of what it is that G is the 7th letter of the alphabet. So the English alphabet has 26 letters. So if you count it again from like 26 to 27 being A, count it back to 7 to G, that would be 33. I've heard that interpretation as well. I can't even remember where I heard that. I heard that probably 8 years ago, a long time ago. But yeah, it does seem to boil down to a lot of interpretation. But when I read some of Pike's stuff, he would say things about the Blue Lodge just being kind of like the outer rung of the entire thing, and that the true interpretations or the true meanings are just reserved for the adepts and the sages and stuff. So according to him, it's a reserved, I guess, secret. It's the true interpretation, whatever that means. So, and then, but I don't know. I mean, he is a people talk about Pike as if he's God, right? And they say everything. A lot of conspiracy people will go with stuff Pike has said as if it's like gospel truth, which isn't. I know that's not necessarily the case, but he does have, or did have, a very high, authority within the southern jurisdiction. But so I would assume that what he says holds some merit, It's very interesting about Truman, though, how the Secret Service wouldn't be allowed in. They had to find Masons to be Secret Service. But yeah, what you say about the widow's sons? I know about them. They're here as well. They ride around with the patch, and they have the triangle and the eye on the patch, I believe. Maybe a pair of wings or something. Yeah, they're here as well. So in New Zealand, we have, it's different. So there's the Grand Lodge of New Zealand, which most lodges in New Zealand come under. And then you have you have a few that belong to the Grand Lodge of Ireland. I think there's 3. I think. And then there's like, the Grand Lodge of Scotland only has 1 lodge here. I think. I'm not sure. but most lodges here come out of the Grand Lodge of New Zealand, which I guess would be recognised by United Grand Lodge of England. But with things like, clandestine lodges, and like I've heard this before, and it's like, some lodges or some jurisdictions or whatever wouldn't recognize other jurisdictions. But I mean, I guess those jurisdictions wouldn't recognize the jurisdictions that don't recognize them either. So it's kind of like, well, I don't know. Is that the case? Like, so for example, like with Egyptian, like Memphis Mizraim, because they, you hear people talk about them, and because they go up to 99 degrees, I believe. And that's a strange one to me. The Memphis Mizraim is a very strange one, but just because there's so many degrees, and it's very well, I mean, masonry, there's esoteric stuff in general, and occult stuff. Occult doesn't mean evil or anything, it just means hidden. It's not necessarily anything bad, but the Memphis Mizraim stuff is very, very esoteric, it seems, and I don't know much about it, to be honest. I do know they're here. I know they're here in New Zealand. But well, I mean, yeah, we also have what do you call it, commanderies, like Knights Templars here, quite a lot. We got Royal Arch here, that's pretty big here. Allied Masonic degrees, I don't know too much about those, but I've heard of them here. What else do we have here? Yeah, well, we have the Scottish Rite, but again, they call it the A&A. That's what they call it here. They don't call it the Scottish Rite, but I believe it's identical, or if not, very similar to the degrees of the Scottish Rite in the United States. And I believe they could mingle with each other, I guess. I mean, I don't know if all the politics and stuff of it. But yeah, like when it comes to like women joining and stuff, like I've heard of like in Europe, and I guess maybe in America as well, they have co-masonry, which is like co-ed, like co-masonry, male female. You guys don't recognize co-masonry, from your jurisdiction? Is co-masonry considered clandestine or irregular? Like even, let's say, even if they went through the first 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge and they got their masters, are they still not considered like legitimate or regular, or is it just once they jump into those other bodies? So if someone like goes through your lodge, for example, like goes to, I don't know, master, and then jumps over to Memphis Mizraim, is he no longer considered like a Mason? Like just completely kicked out, or like what's the deal with that? What you said about Benedict Arnold's very interesting as well, because it's like, I mean, he committed like, I guess, treason, right? Like the worst crime, like punishable by death, and he managed to make it out alive because of his involvement. That's very interesting.
So with the women, basically women are just not allowed in. There is like co-masonry, but they're, again, clandestine. We don't recognize them. So even if a person, let's say like the International Order of Modern Masons, right? Their degree work is exactly the same as ours, but they never had recognition and they never had a charter to even start their lodges. So they're clandestine to us, and we don't fuck with that. So you can't intermingle between Masons either. So like, let's say there's an event going on, right? Let's say there's a parade and the International Order of Modern Masons is there. We can't be there because that would be intermingling. Everybody that went would be expelled. So like we were saying with the women technically weren't even in the first place. So to put it lightly, I mean, since you seem to know like a good chunk of the, like reading portion, I'll bring up one good piece to research if you ever have the time. It's called the It's called I believe it's the Constitutions of Freemasonry by, I can't think of his name. Really early on Mason. But anyway, so Anderson's Constitutions. Basically, that's what we run and base our Masonry around. And even in there, it says it's a fraternal order. So if you were to change one of the landmarks, which are those pieces of the Constitutions in Freemasonry, your clan becomes, or your lodge becomes clandestine. So women at all being Masons is, England has talked to them, and England has like worked with them, but England also works a little bit different than America does when it comes to Masonry. They're very odd. Actually, now that I think about it, we did have an English Grand Master here once. I know him pretty well. He's a pretty cool cat. But so like Memphis Mizraim is practiced in a few places. Not very many, but a few. So it's not like it's non-existent in recognized Masonry. It's just very limited. So like they only practice certain degrees out of it. So AMD though. AMD is basically like a it's called the Allied Masonic Degrees. And what the Allied Masonic Degrees is it's like a research lodge. So what they do is they try to like find old ritual books, old stuff like that, and they find degrees that aren't, done anymore. And they talk about them, they research them, they play them out, that kind of thing. The Memphis Mizraim rite is definitely esoteric. Now, you do have there's a good few esoteric Masons who are either like agnostic, universalist, and like I said, it's all about interpretation. And the reason I bring that up too, because that ties back to Albert Pike. So with Albert Pike, he doesn't necessarily have any sway over the northern jurisdiction. So with the northern jurisdiction, we don't do how the southern jurisdiction does. Basically, the head of the Scottish Rite is called the Grand Sovereign Commander. Now, the Grand Sovereign Commander runs that entire jurisdiction. Up here in the northern jurisdiction, it's usually 5 years max, 2 years minimum. Down there, it's till you die. So it's serious. And again, actually not again, I shouldn't say that. Earlier, I had said that something about honorific 33rds or honorary 33rds and active 33rds. I was wrong. I had talked to a brother at the Masonic Library today because I was out in that area, so I figured I'd stop by, talk to him. And basically, honorary 33rds are people who are 33rds who aren't in the Supreme Council. So you have a Supreme Council, which, you have all the, like I said, the Grand Sovereign Commander, then you have the deputy, I think it's Deputy Sovereign Commander. I think that's what it is. But anywho, so it's just minor differences between North and South. But yeah, the Widow's Sons is the triangle with the eye and the wings. They just got their recognition back here because they were admitting in Masons during COVID, and they were basically told, hey, you cannot fucking be doing that. And they were like, it's fine, they're going to become Masons, when everything opens up. So everything opened up, they didn't want to become Masons. They just wanted the club. So the Grand said, well, you kind of fucked yourself there, so you're stripped of your recognition. And that was years ago. They just got it back, I want to say a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. So with Benedict Arnold, actually, like I was saying, we have those degrees you can watch at home sometimes. I watched one today, and it was the 20th, which covers, or at least in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction. I don't know, because the degrees are different between the two jurisdictions, North and South, and it really depends on which degree. The 19th degree down there is a bit different than the one up here. But anyway, without getting too much into that, yeah, basically Benedict Arnold, he was expelled from Masonry, but George Washington was kind of like, listen, dude, you're fucked because you commit treason. That's, no matter what, no matter which country you did it to, whether, because here's the thing, England, he was a English Freemason, so he was under the United Grand Lodge of England, and I don't think America had any Grand Lodges at the time. They may have, but even England expelled him from Masonry for treason because he went against, because see, the way they look at it is like this. Treason isn't like a crime like how a revolution is, because that was one thing that always confused me. I was like, well, why doesn't George Washington, get expelled for treason? He technically revolted against the crown. And I found out that in Anderson's constitutions, it separates the two. A revolution is a political move, but treason's betraying your own country. And even in Masonry, we preach not nationalism, but patriotism. We preach that, you look out for your country, you love the people in your country, you don't commit treason. and you're patient with your government. Of course, patience runs out. They understand that. That's why that revolutionary bit's in there. That's why George Washington didn't get kicked out, or Benjamin Franklin, or any of the other Masons at the time. But Benedict Arnold commit treason against his own country. And funny enough, he actually came back and lived in America for a little bit. Not a lot of people know that. He lived here in like the 1780s, up until like 1780 maybe. And then, yeah, he was not a very popular figure, so he went back to England, and I think he died there. But, you know, man, like I say, if you ever do come to America, it's not huge here, I shouldn't say, but it's definitely not uncommon. Like, if you're going town to town, you'll see lodges. It's semi-common. But if I'm ever in New Zealand, I'll be sure to check out some of the lodges out there too. And I mean, if you got any other question, man, because you've been like so respectful about shit, I really have like no issue just, you know, chit-chatting about shit. So like, even if it's not masonry related, we can talk about it. Oh, one more thing I want to touch on. That numerology shit gets me so fucking bad, dude. Because I had one the other day. This dude was like bringing all this numerology shit, and I said, you know how Christ is like, you know, three in one. He's, you know, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He's God. We have a triune God. He's like, yeah. It's like, okay, so that's three, right? Like, yeah. I said, was the human nature of Christ that way? I said, well, yes, still God. I was like, okay, so that's three. How about the other nature, the divine nature? He was like, yeah, that's as well. I said, that's 2 3s, 33. That means that Jesus was a Freemason. And then I think he kind of realized like how dumb that shit actually sounds. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, there's people who have hid shit doing that. And like I said, there's shit that Masons have done that we've frowned upon. And that's why we don't like commingle, like how I brought up earlier. Because like, if one of those Masonic groups, like, here's the thing. So if you were to look at like the square and compass, right? The square and compass isn't just used by the Masons. It's used by the Free Gardeners. It's used by the fucking this union group. They have an arm and a hammer in it instead, but they're like crazy. They're like fucking flat out just racist. So like it's a matter of keeping up, you know, PR and like, you know, looks and everything. We kind of have to separate ourselves from those groups, because if they do something crazy, we have to be like, yeah, that wasn't us. Because general public, you know, doesn't know to differentiate those. They don't know that there's different Grand Lodges and shit like that, and I don't blame them for that. It's not out of arrogance, it's just out of ignorance. You don't know. Like, I can't expect you to know something you don't know. It's just not, you know what I mean? So I try to be patient with people. But man, do they test my patience.
Yeah, I have seen in the United Kingdom, they do have like those women-only lodges. Not Eastern Star, like because men can join Eastern Star as well, but like they'll have like lodges under the UGLE that are just like women only, as far as I know. Yeah, because traditionally speaking, or constitutionally speaking, it has always been men only, and yeah, I mean that's the same with everything. I mean, like, you know, it's separate from Masonry, but with things like the Bohemian Grove, for example, like that is male only, full stop. There is no like women allowed, and I don't know the reason for that. Maybe, I guess, women can't keep their mouth shut or something like that. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. But yeah, with the Allied Masonic degrees, does that include what's it called? The one with the rainbow and the arc. Royal Ark Mariners? I don't know. But the Allied Masonic degrees are there are a bunch of different orders, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like there's like Royal Ark Mariners, and like there's like a few others. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But or at least here in New Zealand, that's how it works, I think. I honestly, I don't know about that. But when you're talking about like research lodges and stuff, I was actually just looking into, well, the research lodge of England back in the day, Quator Coronati, and it was started by the Commissioner of the Met Police in London, Sir Charles Warren. He was a sir, and I think he was the guy. He was the commissioner at the time of the Jack the Ripper thing. And there's some sort of theory about the Masons in England and the murders, Jack the Ripper murders and stuff. I don't know if you've seen the movie From Hell with Johnny Depp. It's I mean, it's a movie. I don't know how much of it is true, how much of it is false or whatever. But there seemed to be something going on with that. And honestly, I don't know enough about the Jack the Ripper murders to even speak about it. So I don't know. But where was I going with this? Charles Warren, yeah. So Charles Warren was because he was part of something called, back in the day, the British Empire had this thing called the PEF, the Palestine Exploration Fund, and they basically they got funding from Rothschilds and stuff, but they also got funding from the UGLE. And this was at the time when the Ottoman Empire was still around. So they would basically like survey. They traveled to the Holy Land and stuff, and they would survey and map the land of like Palestine or Israel, whatever you want to call it. And later on, those maps and everything were used by the British in World War One to actually take down the Ottomans and stuff. But when you look at the connection and you see that, like, there definitely was, and people overblow it and make it into this very dramatic thing, but there's no doubt in my mind that there was, is, or at least was, some sort of connection between governments of back in the day and, like, Masonry, or at least Masons involved in those types of things. And some could say, well, almost every leader back in the day was a Mason. You could say that. And as you were saying earlier, it's like, 18 presidents were Freemasons or something. 1/3 of all the US presidents. And then you got like Bill Clinton, who was like DeMolay, but I don't think that counts, really. Because that's not really, like, he hasn't really been initiated. But then you have like George Bush, who was, for example, like, part of Skull and Bones and stuff, like, and a lot of them were part of the Bohemian Grove. And when you look at it, there really is something, because there is a lot of like, top people in the government and whatnot who are connected in some way with some sort of fraternity, But yeah, like, that makes sense about the sovereign, what's it called? Sovereign Grand Commander, like Pike. Like, I guess that would be active 33rd versus like honorary, like Manly P. Hall or Ronald Reagan or something. Yeah, because I've heard Masons before say that 33 is nothing. It's just like, it's just honorary and stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But there is also like the Supreme Council, which is, or the active. And it is, for life. That's interesting how in the South it's for life. I guess that's why some people call Pike the Pope of Masonry. It's not really an accurate term, but I guess in the sense of it being a lifetime tenure, I guess it's correct in that sense. But with Benedict Arnold, that's very interesting to me, because it's like he committed treason, and he was, man, like, they should have been like off with his head type thing, It's very interesting that never happened, neither in America or in England. But yeah, I don't know that much about Benedict Arnold. Like, I'd heard of him, sorry. And I have some idea of the situation, but honestly, I do not know that much at all about Benedict Arnold. I just know he betrayed, like, he was like on the American side, and then he betrayed them, took side with the crown or whatever. Which, it's interesting that he ended up living in both countries afterwards and didn't get any bad treatment or whatever. But yeah, like, as you say, it's like Masonry promotes patriotism, because it's like when you take the obligation or whatever, you have to kind of obey the laws of the land and stuff like that, and not not commit treason or murder and stuff. But I like, as you say, like the rituals and the oaths and stuff, you can easily kind of find them online. And I was reading through Royal Arch. The Royal Arch is strange because, you know, the whole Yabulon stuff, which I don't really understand what that is, but, you know. But in the Oath of the Royal Arch, it's like goes from, you know, protect your brother even unless he's committed murder or treason. But in the Royal Arch, it's like you got to protect them and give shelter to them even if they've committed murder or treason. That's what it said in the book I read. I don't know if that was accurate or not. And I forget who wrote it or who published it. But yeah, the Royal Arch is interesting. One time a Mason said to me, and I think he was kind of speaking symbolically here. I don't really know what he meant by this, but he said the Royal Arch is the 33rd degree. Like, I think what he was meaning was like the Royal Arch is what people think, you know, like the average person who goes 33rd degree, oh my God, like, you know, they freak out, you know. I think what he was meaning by that is like the Royal Arch is where the kind of maybe the creepy stuff kind of is. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, you know. Only they know. I don't know, you know. Unless you're in there, it's just you can read books and stuff. You can try to find things out, but I mean, it's hard to know, really. And yeah, the numerology stuff gets me as well. I mean, you know, I do think, you know, with gematria and stuff, there definitely is like, and the whole Kabbalah thing, because here in New Zealand, the oldest lodge in the country, it's in Auckland City. I've seen it, and on the outside the front, by the doorway, they have like 33 Merkaba symbols outlining the door, like the Merkaba, like it's part of like Jewish mysticism. Maybe you know about it, the Merkaba mysticism and stuff. It's like that kind of stuff. It's like a 3D Star of David. That's what it looks like. And or hexagram, whatever you want to call it. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, numerology, man. It's like, man, there's only like 10 numbers, right? 0 to 9. The odds of those numbers coinciding with each other here and there is very high. Like, there's going to be patterns everywhere. Like, it's nothing. People go way overboard with the numerology stuff. And again, I mean, with gematria and Kabbalah, like, there is something to it, but it's like all this like TikTok numerology and stuff is just like, it's just like ridiculous, honestly. It's kind of funny. But what you were saying about that organization with the arm and the hammer, I forget what you called it, what the name was, but I've seen it. I've seen it before. That it's like an arm and a hammer. And I don't know where I've seen it. But yeah, it does kind of look like the square and compass in a way. I mean, you could say the hammer and sickle is similar, you know, like two tools like overlapping each other. And here in New Zealand, actually, I've seen there's one lodge down in a place called Arrowtown in the South Island. And I was just there recently, and I saw it. And they actually have like a sextant as well. Like it's the square and the compass, but it's also a sextant. Which I don't know why they, I don't know. I thought that would be like forbidden to like add another symbol on top of the square and compass. But yeah, they have like a sextant. I don't know if you've ever seen that in the States or not.
Oh, so basically, sorry, I'm laying down and relaxing because it's been a long fucking day. But I was happy I was able to stop at the museum, talk to a brother. Anyway, so basically, the Job's Daughters were like another youth group, kind of like the D Malay and the Rainbow Girls. I'm pretty sure they weren't gender exclusive, but they might have been. I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, they kept like fucking with the bylaws, changing shit, and then the Grand Lodges were like, well, we need to know what's going on. And they were like, kind of just kept on changing, didn't say anything. And it got to the point where even like the international order was like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And they kind of just fell out. Like, it sucked for a lot of the kids because they were like, that was like their little clique, you know, like that was their thing. And they lost recognition because the adults wanted to like run shit. And that's why with like D Malay and Rainbow Girls, it's encouraged that the kids run shit, and the adults are just there to keep everything in check. Because, like, how are you going to teach a kid leadership skills if you're just like, no, let me handle it. You know what I mean? Anyway, I was going to say, one of the cooler things about our lodges is most lodges in America have a painting of George Washington, because it's like our, I compare it to, because, like, I'm Welsh, hence the American and Welsh flag. For us, it's kind of like Maxen Wledig, where Maxen Wledig was like our claim to royalty. It was like, yeah, Magnus Maximus kind of left us alone, let us have our country, and then a bunch of, like, stories and mythology came out of it. There's this book called the Mabinogion, and it's like 12 like really important Welsh stories, or like Welsh folk tales, and one of them is the dream of Maxen Wledig, where he meets a Welsh woman and he marries her. And that's kind of like, the Welsh use that as like a claim to royalty, I guess is one way to put it. And that's like, I compare that to the Masons, where it's like, that's our claim to, like, royalty is like, the first president was a Mason. Like, that's, to us, that's like cool shit. It's like, hell yeah. We're kind of founded by Masons. A good chunk of the founding fathers were Masons too. Even like some of the figures that had helped us out in the Revolutionary War, like, I don't know if you know about Marquis de Lafayette. He was a 19-year-old. He got like his family's fortune. Rich motherfucker. He just decided to hop in a fucking ship one day and take that bitch to America and help out. And he did a damn good job too. That was the crazy thing. But yeah, like I said, Masonic history is interesting. Anything before like 1717 is a little bit touchy, because that's when the first Grand Lodge started. So everything before that's kind of speculation. That's why we have like these research lodges, is because we don't know everything that happened beforehand, And like you were saying with the Royal Ark Mariners, that's a degree that was retired that we don't do anymore. So that's like in one of the research lodges. And it's pretty much just, we don't even know everything about the origins of Freemasonry. We're still, for ourselves, researching shit. And that's the whole thing with being speculative Masons as opposed to operative Masons. There's operative Masonic lodges out there still. But most lodges, especially in America, are speculative, where we don't do, we don't do like actual stonemasonry. But there's a funny story too. I think it was Harry Truman, how we talked about him before. When he rebuilt a part of the White House, he found bricks that had like etchings in them. And those etchings are like how do I word this? It's like the calling card for a Mason. So like, let's say your brother, Jubilee Joe, and you want to get paid for your work. Well, you etch your symbol in there. So each Mason had their own individual symbol. So then when all the bricks were done, being chiseled out and everything, they would know how many bricks so-and-so did, how many bricks so-and-so did. So then they knew who to pay and how much to pay. And when they were taking apart the White House, they realized that the White House was built by Masons. Those bricks had those Masonic etchings in them. So what they did was he sent one to each Grand Lodge. And the one that was sent to the Grand Lodge in Michigan was being used as a door stopper. So, yeah. Funny how that happens. Funny enough, DeMolay was started by a guy in Kansas, actually exactly 100 years ago. So not only celebrating our 200 years of Masonry this year, we're celebrating our 100 years of DeMolay. And like I said, I just find it all interesting, because the dude that founded it, great dude. One of the guys I know actually met him at a time. I think he's like 86, and he had met the guy that started DeMolay. It was because in DeMolay you call the advisors like dad or mom. So like, they didn't want to say father because that sounds too, religious and priestly. They wanted something that was seen as like a respectful thing. I could have been master counselor in my DeMolay, which is like the, worshipful master of DeMolay, and I couldn't because of work and everything. Like I said, I joined the Masons and DeMolay at the same time, so I only got like a year in DeMolay. But it's cool because like we meet up with DeMolays all over the state, and we just, have like coordinated events and shit. It's fun.
Oh yeah, DeMolay. I know a little, not much about DeMolay. I just know it's like a youth organization. And funnily enough, Bill Cooper was a DeMolay. He was never like a full Mason or anything, but he was a D Malay in his youth. Yeah, but other than that, I really don't know that much about D Malay. And yeah, it's as you say, like it's interesting because the United States is basically a Masonic creation. Like a lot of the founding fathers were part of it, as you say. You know, Paul Revere, Franklin, Washington. Like I don't was Jefferson. I don't know if Jefferson was or not. I don't know. I'm not even from the United States, so I don't really know the history that well. But I try to get a good grasp on it. You know, especially because the United States is the current, I guess, number one world power or whatever. So everything that happens in the United States has an effect on the world at large. So it's kind of like good to know, even if you don't live there. Most people in New Zealand don't know anything about the United States. I guess even in America, you have a lot of people that don't know anything about their own country. And but yeah, even in the whole system of America and what America's about, and how the Constitution and what it stands for, and the Bill of Rights and everything, it does reflect like Masonic ideals in a way, because it's like, for example, like freedom of religion. Before the United States, I mean, it was just like, if you didn't believe what the kings or the Pope or the whoever wanted you to believe, they could just like, knock your head off, and just do it like, you had no say in anything. And that's the one thing I do like about Masonry, and the one thing I admire about like the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights is like you can practice whatever religion you want, as long as you're not like harming anyone else. You have the freedom to do so. It's the one thing I admire. And it's unfortunate that like a lot of modern administrations, presidents and stuff, kind of disregard the Constitution in a lot of ways, and I think that's very dangerous. I think because the Constitution really is the thing that stands between keeping America what it was intended to be, and America falling into something like, like what happened with Rome, for example. So the Constitution, everything is very important. But yeah, no, interesting about the White House. Funnily enough, in New Zealand, we have some similar stuff. I mean, you could probably find online more stuff about this, but I could give you the basic gist. It's like, here we have, obviously we're part of the Commonwealth, right? So we have a Prime Minister instead of President. But our Parliament, so we have a Parliament, but our Parliament building is a beehive. And, the beehive symbolism, I'm sure you know what I mean. And the Prime Minister who, like, commissioned the building of that was a Freemason himself. Keith Holyoake is his name. And, yeah, we've had quite a few Freemason prime ministers here, and I think because we have governor generals as well, and I think I read somewhere once every governor general in the 20th century was a Freemason, every single one. So yeah, we have a lot of lodges here as well for a small country. I think we have it's in the I don't know, maybe 160-ish. But I mean, the country only has 5 million people, So it's quite a lot in comparison to the population. And yeah, as you say, it's kind of obscure, the origins of it, before 1717. I mean, there's like references and stuff, like they found like inscriptions here and there, of an organization called Freemasonry dating back to like the 13th, 14th century, I think. And, but yeah, nobody really knows. And if they do know, they're not telling everyone. Maybe it's like some top secret thing and they only reveal it to, I don't know, who knows, right? But in like the conspiracy circles and stuff, you hear a lot of stuff. You hear that, they came from the Rosicrucians, or they came from the Templars, and no one really knows, but it is very interesting. It is very interesting. And when you go all the way back to, the ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Mithra and stuff like that, there are like a lot of similarities, like the initiation process and the kind of just the whole atmosphere of it is very similar. And that's what Cooper thought, is that it descends from those ancient mystery schools, and it just changed its name over time and kind of evolved into different things in different points in time, and that they play a role in the sort of behind the scenes workings of civilization itself. That's his whole thing. And yeah, I mean, when you study it, like, you can see it makes sense, especially when you look at the US and other countries, and all of the kind of revolutions that took place worldwide in the 1800s, early 1900s. Yeah, I mean, it's plausible,
I entirely agree. I mean, the United States is like a Masonic thing, and like people look past that. It's like, dude, we made all this shit, and then you think we're this like satanic, like crazy shit. It's like, no, dude, we're literally built on Masonic ideals. It's like, I love the founding fathers, but I hate the Masons. They're Jews. It's like, bro, who the fuck you think the founding fathers were, bro? They were Masons. And like, Jefferson was one. Paul Revere was a good one. I've been to his grave. It's over in Massachusetts. I was there on a job once, and I was like, you know what? Fuck, I'll check out all the Masonic shit. So like, I saw John Warren's tomb. Not John Warren's. Something relating to John Warren, but like, I had seen stuff like that, and no, the United States is literally a Masonic creation.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's true, and I mean, unless you're a Mason or someone who studies history in depth, it's kind of not really a known thing, yeah. And people kind of take for granted the world we live in today, and it's like, oh, they're a bunch of satanic blah, 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 and it's like, hold on. Like, I don't think they realize, if they were living 500 years ago, how much worse the world was like 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, And I think it's just like, yeah, people are very ungrateful for the world and the kind of system we live in. It has its flaws and stuff, but God, it beats what we had 500 years ago, by a long shot. Yeah, this right here is what I was talking about earlier. This lodge, I think, was the first lodge in New Zealand. Been there since the early mid 1800s, but that's what I was referring to, the 33 Merkaba symbols. When I passed it, I saw it and I was looking at it, and I thought, what is that? And I kind of like looked closer at it, and I ended up coming across it like Merkaba, because I didn't know what Merkaba even was or anything. I still don't. I mean, you can read that little explanation, but I don't really understand it. But I just found it interesting that it had the symbols all over it. And then when I thought to myself, I was like, let me count how many there are. And when I counted them and there was 33, I was like, oh shit, Luckily I had my head on straight. If I didn't, I'd probably start thinking that there was a bunch of Jews inside there or something,
Oh yeah, but like with the Merkaba, it looks like the Star of David, right? So I mean, I can completely see how that happens. And then if you were to look at like certain churches still use what a Jewish person would call the Star of David, but we would call it I forget what it usually shows up on Catholic churches. And basically what it is, it's like, it looks like the Star of David, but it represents I can't think of what exactly it represents each point, but it represents something. I'll have to get back to you on that. But yeah, even like 100 years ago with the medical advancements we make, I think that's a very important thing as well, because like even in the last 50 years, 100 years, we've made so many medical advancements that we didn't know before. So it makes me wonder now, like, what do we not know now? What are we just overlooking now?
Well, yeah, I mean, the hexagram or the Star of David, I mean, it never even had anything to do with Judaism until recently. Like, when you read the Old Testament and stuff, there's no mention of, like, David having a star or, like, any sort of reference to a Star of David. There's a Star of Remphan, but God's talking about the Star of Remphan in a negative light, you know? So, it's kind of like, I don't really understand why whoever adopted a Zionist Congress, or whoever decided to adopt that symbol as the sort of, I guess, national or whatever symbol for Judaism. I don't know why they decided on that. A menorah would have been much more fitting, you know, if they had the, like, Israeli flag with a menorah on it. That would make sense. But I don't understand why they used the hexagram. Anyway, yeah, like what you say about medical advancements, for example, it's like, when you look at the timeline of just the last several thousand years, you know, it's like for thousands of years, we were like riding on horseback, and that was the way it was for thousands and thousands of years. And then right up until about like, what, a little over 100 years ago, we were still doing the same. And now you look at, 2026, we're flying around in jets, and we have like AI, and like everything has advanced so quickly in such a short space of time relative to the grand scheme of things. And it's like, there must be something going on. There's some big change taking place for sure. There's some sort of change taking place. Like, maybe it's just, some would say it's just human advancement. Some would say it's something else, but it's undeniable how much things are advancing in society in general. And it's also very interesting that we happen to be born just at the right time to experience it as well.
Oh yeah, I just find it crazy how quickly things have been advancing as of lately, especially. I was actually looking into this one today. I just bought a bunch of books about, like some of the historical figures that were Masons. Like I have one about George Washington. I grabbed one about Ben Franklin, Marquis de Lafayette, people like that. But anyway, then there was one I couldn't find that I really wanted, and it was John Brown. And I don't think John Brown gets talked enough about. So John Brown was a very radical abolitionist. Like I'm talking, he raided a Federal Reserve to prove a point. And he did prove a pretty goddamn big point. I mean, he went to Kansas. Sorry, it's the night before 4th of July, so shit's popping off, obviously. Anyway, or that could just be the whole, living around thing, but that is. Anyway, John Brown, he was a Mason. He fell out of, what do you call it, which by technicality, he'd have been kicked out of Masonry for treason, but it's... Back then, yeah, you could have said he would have gotten kicked out for treason. Today, a little bit different because, we don't have slaves anymore. So he was a very radical abolitionist. I don't know the history of slavery in New Zealand. I don't know if you guys ever had it or anything like that, which hopefully you didn't, but I don't know New Zealand's history all that well. But anyway, he was hanged, and pretty much he was like a precursor to the Civil War. They say he was like the fuse that lit because while he was fighting, he gave a note to one of the people at his trial before he was hanged, technically is the right word. But anyway, he gave a letter to one of the people that was at his trial, and it basically said, I now know that the slaves cannot be freed without blood. Like, he knew that they had to fight, because a lot of abolitionists in the North didn't like John Brown because he was pro-violence. He said, like, this has to be purged with blood. There is no other way. These slave owners, you can send them as many letters as you want and talk to them. It's not going to happen. And they stuck to, oh, well, maybe it'll work. Well, considering John Brown led a raid in Kansas because one of his sons got killed. Well, I don't remember if it was his son that got killed, but, like, they were getting attacked, and he straight up raided Kansas. And then they finally were like, oh, shit. Okay, well, let's make Kansas a free state. The president did that out of fear of this dude. And he became this super big figure in the abolitionist movement. But I've always liked John Brown.
It's pretty badass. I've never actually heard of John Brown. But that quote, what you said about the blood must be spilled or whatever, it reminds me of what Jefferson said about the tree of liberty must be replenished from time to time by the blood of patriots and tyrants. It's very similar
very similar belief, and it's very true. Very true. You know, for change to take place, there has to be, you know, blood spilled. That's just how it is, and you can't really vote your way, you know, out of certain situations. Yeah, and I mean, some people would consider that, you know, a crime or you know, treasonous or terrorism even or something like that. I mean, in the eyes of the crown back in the day, the founding fathers would have been considered terrorists, you know. So it's all interpretation, you know. And but yeah, I don't know too much about John Brown. I've never even heard of John Brown. I don't think. Again, I don't know the whole history of the U.S. like as well as like I'd say the average American would, because they don't teach it here in school. It's just from what I've researched, you know, in my free time and stuff. But here in New Zealand, we never had slavery per se. It was more similar to, because the native population here is the Maori, you know, the Pacific Islanders, the Maoris. And it would be akin to the way, I guess, Native Americans were, you know, handled, dealt with, whatever. Very similar sort of way. They weren't slaves, really. It was more just like, well, even when my mom was in elementary school, here we call it primary school, it was like you could not speak, like the Maori students, you could not speak Maori at school. Like you would get hit, like the teachers would hit you, you know. That was in my mom's lifetime, and yeah, they but now, you know, they're pretty much equal. There's some people who say, you know, otherwise and stuff. It's a debate. Depends on how you look at things. Again, depends on how you see the world. It depends on, you know, how much personal responsibility you believe people have versus the sort of, you know what I'm saying. But yeah, no, it's interesting. It's interesting how many Masons were involved in the not only the creation of the U.S., but also like just other things beyond that as well. I was just having a little look about John Brown, and he actually allegedly renounced Freemasonry, stepped away from it in the 1820s, after the whole William Morgan situation.
Yeah, with that, I looked into that. Given that I have, like, you know, I understand how the structure of Freemasonry works and everything like that, John Brown was moving a fuck ton. And mind you, this was like the 1800s. So you can't exactly pay your lodge dues, so you become an unpaying member. Well, when you become an unpaying member, you're not a Mason. You just are an inactive Mason. So you're still a Mason, you just are not dues paying. So you don't get the privileges of being a Mason. I mean, yes, you still have the title, but you don't get the, you know, everything else. And I read about where he renounced Freemasonry. The only issue that I have with it is, like, I'm not denying it's possible, because the William Morgan affair was fucked up, and like that caused a lot of Masons to be like, fuck, you know. My issue is that there's no contemporary source for the quote that he like renounced it. So that quote comes from like the 1950s. So there's really nothing before that, or at least not that I could find, that proves that he said, like, I renounce Freemasonry because of this, this, and this. And then again, you got to think too, like, you know, around that time period, well, actually just forever, people were always saying, like, they're doing this, like the Anglicans used to write fake letters about us, claiming it was Masons that were all proved wrong. The Catholic Church has always maintained a strong hatred of us because of Leo Taxel, after Leo Taxel fucking embarrassed them, and they knew they couldn't just backtrack after that situation. But you know, I couldn't find anything to say that like he left and then made like a public announcement, because like people were saying that he did, Google said he did, but when I actually looked into the source of it, it only popped up in like the 1950s. So like 100 years later was the first mentioning of it. the most you got before that was like his wife after he died mentioned, yeah, he was a Mason. And the issue is like back then, especially African lodges, you don't have many, documentations or anything like that because a lot of that stuff burned. And like I say, he was very, very, very active in the African American community. I mean, like, he would sit in at like all black congregations and everything. He was very progressive first day, but he was extremely radical. Like, Frederick Douglass agreed with him to a sense till like the very end, and then everybody that raided that fucking that Federal Reserve either got killed or like I think 2 people escaped, but they got caught because I mean they sent in like Robert E. Lee and shit to go fucking kill them because they fucked up by trying to take over a train. Like I said, there's a lot that goes into it, but yeah. As for the Masonry part, I couldn't find anything. Because even I was curious. I was like, did he actually leave? Did he just stop paying dues? Did he get in trouble? Did he get expelled? And nothing. So I couldn't really find anything on the matter. But that's how it was for like, under the crown. That's how it was for like the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, and the Manx. It was they could never speak their native tongues, which technically Scotland doesn't have a native tongue because the Scottish that are there today are descended of the Irish because the native Scottish, the Pictish, were assimilated to the point of unrecognition. Like you would never know if someone was Pictish because they've been so assimilated into the like Irish population in Scotland that it's pretty much impossible to tell if anybody had any Pictish DNA at all. And they even had their own language, but obviously they got wiped out, so the language doesn't exist. You still have like Scottish Gaelic, you have Irish Gaelic, Manx, Welsh, but even now a lot of people don't speak it because like the crown would punish you when I speak it. Even in schools you couldn't speak it. Especially with Welsh, they would put what's called a Welsh knot on you, which is like a wooden board that either said like Welsh or like WK or something like that or not. And if you were wearing it at the end of the day, because they only had one, if you were wearing it at the end of the day, you would you'd be punished. But it all depended on the school. Some schools didn't do it, but a good portion did.
Yeah, the Morgan affair was a big problem. I mean, it created a whole political party, the anti-Masonic party, and I don't know a whole lot about them, but I know it was the first third party in the United States or whatever. But for a while there, I don't think they were very successful in what they were trying to accomplish. They didn't really get that. I mean, they had a decent amount of support, but not enough to actually do anything. And but yeah, around that time, after that William Morgan thing, I think it was quite common for Masons to leave. I had a look, so it said that I looked on the website, Hudson Lodge in Ohio, but the link is broken, so I had to take the link to the Internet Archive, but managed to get in. And so it said he was raised, he was brought in to Masonry in 1824, and it said he renounced it in 1826 due to the scandal or surrounding William Morgan. I can send you the link to that if you want. It's Hudson Lodge, forget the number, in Ohio, because I think it's the lodge, it must be the lodge where he was from, which he belonged to. And it said apparently his uncle was the master of that lodge as well. But yeah, no, when it comes to the, what do you call it? I guess the British Empire, they did seem to use the same tactic, right? When it came to, suppressing the local populations everywhere. I mean, their own neighbors as well, as you say, and yeah, they were running on a very strict, very similar framework around the world, and it seemed to work. They were quite successful in what they did, Something I do find kind of strange, though, this is a little bit off topic, is how, the British Empire, right? It was the most powerful empire in the world. I mean, even when America was, happy 250th, by the way, when America was fully, how do you say it, independent, and you know, preceding the world wars and stuff, Britain was still the top dog, basically, you know, and nobody ever overthrew the British Empire, so where did it go exactly? You know what I'm saying? Now, if you look into it, they say, well, World War II caused the economy to collapse, or something like that. But it's like that whole structure, that whole empire structure, wasn't toppled by any other empire. You know, they weren't overthrown. They weren't, you know, maybe the economy might have gone down, but how does that exactly wipe out the entire empire and they just lose everything? See, to me, that's one thing I don't understand. I feel like they still play a very big role in the world, but it's just less visible. You know, people now, they think, oh, America's on the top, and it is. And it probably is. I wouldn't say for sure, because I don't know, right? But maybe, I mean, in the public sort of way, yes. But behind the scenes, I mean, I still think the British Empire, and the City of London, the Crown, whatever that actually is, there's no real definition of what the Crown is. There's like lots of different interpretations of what the Crown is, but some people think it's the Queen, but it's not. It's not. It's like a corporation, but it doesn't really make sense because we don't really know who owns the corporation. Anyway, yeah.